Noah didn't sleep for an entire year, 370 days without sleeping, and a lion nearly killed him inside the ark. But that's not even half of what happened in there. Because what most people believe about Noah's ark is completely wrong. They think the flood lasted 40 days. No, 40 days was just the rain. Noah was locked inside for 370 days, an entire year and 10 days. And what he lived through inside that structure during that time is so brutal that Noah himself asked God to let him out of that prison. Yes, he called it a prison, not a refuge, a prison. Today, we're going inside that ark, day by day, phase by phase, and you're going to discover why Noah came out limping, why he was spitting blood, which animal attacked him, what he did with the tons of excrement, how it was possible that he didn't sleep for 12 months, and why, at the end of it all, God himself called him a foolish shepherd. That's what he said to him, to Noah, the most righteous man of his generation. Let's rewind to day 0, Genesis 7, verse 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Notice the level of detail. It doesn't say one day it rained. It says the exact year, the exact month, the exact day. This isn't a fable, it's a record with the precision of a ship's log. But before the first drop fell, there's something you need to know to understand the magnitude of what was about to happen. Noah had been building that ark for 120 years. Genesis 6, verse 3 establishes that period. And the Lord said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. 120 years of warning. 120 years of a man alone, in the midst of an entire civilization that considered him insane, felling timber, shaping planks, sealing joints with pitch, raising a colossal naval structure on dry land. The Talmud in Sanhedrin 108b says that while Noah was building, people would pass by and ask him what he was doing. He would answer that God was going to send a flood to destroy the earth, and they laughed. They told him that if God sent water from below, they had iron plates to cover the earth. If the water came from above, they had something called akev, a type of protection they believed could stop anything. Noah tried to warn them. 2 Peter 2, verse 5, calls him a preacher of righteousness. Noah preached, warned, implored for 120 years, and no one listened to him. Not a single person outside his family entered the ark. And then, 7 days before the flood, God gave him a very specific order. Genesis 7, verse 4, "For after 7 more days, I will cause it to rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, 7 days of final preparation. 7 days to get all the animals inside the ark." Rabbinic tradition, specifically Midrash Bereshit Rabbah, chapter 32, says, those 7 days were also a period of mourning for Methuselah, Noah's grandfather, who had just died at the age of 969 years, the longest-lived man recorded in the entire Bible. God waited for Methuselah to die naturally before unleashing the flood. Even in judgment, there was mercy. And this is where the first myth needs to be dismantled, because the image you have in your head right now is probably Noah standing in front of the ark, while the animals walk in single file, 2 by 2, up a little wooden ramp. That Sunday school image, calm, orderly, pretty, forget it. Genesis 7 verses 2 and 3 specify something that changes the entire scene. You shall take with you 7 each of every clean animal, a male and his female, 2 each of animals that are unclean, a male and his female. It wasn't 2 of every species. It was 14 of every clean animal and 2 of every unclean animal. The number of animals that entered that ark was enormously greater than what you imagine, and the ark wasn't a little boat. Genesis 6, verses 15 and 16 give the exact dimensions: 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. If we use the standard Hebrew cubit of approximately 44 centimeters, we're talking about a structure 132 meters long, 22 meters wide, and 13 meters tall. That's bigger than a football field, bigger than most cargo ships that existed until the 19th century, with 3 stories and a single door. And that door is crucial. Genesis 7 verse 16 says something people read without stopping: "And the Lord shut him in." It wasn't Noah who closed the door of the ark. It was God. Personally, God sealed the entrance from outside. That means 2 things simultaneously. First, those inside couldn't get out even if they wanted to. The decision was made. Second, those outside couldn't get in even if they tried. Mercy has a temporal limit: 120 years of warning, 7 final days with the door open. And then silence, closure, end. The Talmud in Sanhedrin 108b says that when the first drops began to fall, some people ran toward the ark trying to get in, but the door was closed, sealed by God himself, and God had placed lions and other fierce animals around the ark to protect Noah and his family from those who tried to break down the door by force. Think about that image. Outside, the water rising, people screaming, pounding on the wood, begging, and inside, Noah hearing everything, unable to open, without authorization to open, the door that God closed, no man could open. What does it feel like to hear your entire civilization die on the other side of a wooden wall? That's a question the biblical text doesn't answer directly, but the Midrash Tanchuma in the Noach section does address it. It says the sound of the screams was the reason Noah couldn't sleep during the first month inside the ark. It wasn't just the work with the animals. It was the trauma of knowing that outside, every person he had known in his life, every neighbor, every merchant, every child was dying, and he hadn't done enough to save them. Genesis 6 verse 16. "You shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it to a cubit from above, and set the door of the ark in its side, with lower, second, and third decks, 3 complete levels, a window at the top, and a single side door." That's it. 1 source of ventilation and 1 exit, for 8 people and hundreds of animals, for an entire year. Now, the Jewish tradition preserved in the Talmud, specifically in the tractate Sanhedrin 108b, describes how those 3 floors were distributed. The upper level was for Noah and his family. The middle level was for the animals. And the lower level was for the waste. Tons and tons of animal excrement accumulating over 12 months. And what's even more striking, they didn't even dump it into the water. They stored it below. In the midst of the destruction of the entire world, Noah maintained a waste management system inside the ark. But there's something about this layout you need to understand before we continue. Each floor of the ark had exactly the same height as the Temple of Jerusalem that would be built centuries later, and each floor had 3 times the area of the tabernacle courtyard. Theologian Gordon Wenham, in his commentary on Genesis, published by Word Biblical Commentary, notes that this is no coincidence. The ark was a microcosm, a model of the universe in miniature. The upper level represented heaven, the middle level represented the earth, and the lower level represented the underworld. The same tripartite pattern the Israelites would later use to design the tabernacle and the temple. Noah wasn't just surviving. He was inhabiting a structure with cosmic significance. But what was happening inside that structure is what nobody tells you. And now is where things get really dark, because what happened inside the ark during the first 40 days looks nothing like what you imagine. The smell of incense doesn't exist here. What exists is the smell of damp wood mixed with the stench of hundreds of animals locked in a space with no real ventilation. The darkness is nearly total. The only source of light, according to Midrash Bereshit Rabbah chapter 31, was a precious stone called Sohar that Noah carried with him and that emitted its own luminosity. There were no torches, there was no fire. Fire and wood inside a sealed ship during a flood is not a viable combination. So for 370 days, life inside the ark unfolded in a perpetual twilight illuminated by the faint glow of a stone. And outside, the world was ending. Genesis 7 verse 11 doesn't just say it rained. It says all the fountains of the great deep were broken up. The Hebrew word for this is tehom. If you look up entry 1067 in Strong's Concordance, you'll find that tehom is the primordial deep, the same chaotic waters of Genesis 1 verse 2. It wasn't just rain falling from the sky. It was subterranean waters bursting from below, while simultaneously the floodgates of heaven opened from above. An attack from two fronts, from below and from above at the same time. And what that meant for the 8 people inside goes beyond what any disaster movie has ever shown you. 40 days and 40 nights of this, non-stop. The sound of that rain pounding against the wood of the ark must have been deafening. Imagine being inside a wooden structure of 130 meters while outside a flood of catastrophic proportions falls for 40 consecutive days. The constant noise, the vibration of the structure, the movement of the water lifting the ark off the ground for the first time. Genesis 7, verse 17, now the flood was on the earth 40 days, and the waters increased and lifted up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. That moment, the moment the ark lifts off the ground. Think about it. For years, perhaps decades, that structure sat there planted on dry land while the entire world mocked Noah, the ship that would never touch water, the madness of an old prophet. And now, suddenly the water lifts it, the structure moves, it tilts, it sways, and inside 8 people and hundreds of animals feel the ground disappear beneath them. And the ark had no rudder, it had no sails, it had no oars, it had no steering mechanism of any kind. Genesis mentions no navigation system. The ark was designed for one thing: to float, not to navigate. Not to go to any specific destination, just to stay afloat while everything around it sank. And that's theologically significant. Noah didn't control where he was going. He couldn't choose his course. He couldn't avoid currents or dodge obstacles. The direction of the ark was entirely in God's hands. Noah was the caretaker of the cargo, but he wasn't the pilot. The pilot was invisible. The waters kept rising. Genesis 7, verses 18 and 19. The waters prevailed exceedingly on the earth, and all the high hills under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed 15 cubits upward, and the mountains were covered. While the ark rose, the world disappeared beneath it. First the plains, then the valleys, then the hills, then the mountains, until nothing was visible except water in every direction. A global ocean without a single island, without a single point of reference, without a horizon that wasn't water meeting water. But here's something many don't consider. What was happening outside while the ark floated? Genesis 7, verses 21 through 23. And all flesh died that moved on the earth. Birds and cattle and beasts and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the Spirit of life, all that was on the dry land, died. And he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground. Noah couldn't see this directly, but he could hear it. He could imagine what was happening on the other side of those wooden walls. All of humanity, except 8 people, was dying. And inside the ark there was no time to process that, because the animals needed to eat. This is where the story transforms from biblical narrative to extreme survival manual. The Talmud in Sanhedrin 108b records a fascinating conversation. Abraham sent his servant Eliezer to speak with Shem, Noah's son, and Eliezer asked directly how they had managed to care for so many animals for so long. Shem's answer is revealing. We had great tribulation in the ark. The animals that normally eat during the day, we fed during the day, and those that normally eat at night, we fed at night. Do you grasp what that means? Noah and his 3 sons worked 24 hours a day shifts for the diurnal animals, night shifts for the nocturnal animals. 8 people covering shifts 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 370 consecutive days. The same Talmud says Noah did not sleep during the 12 months he was inside the ark, a year without sleep, and Shem adds another incredible detail in that same Talmudic conversation. He says his father didn't know what the chameleon ate. One day, Noah was cutting open a pomegranate when a worm fell out of the fruit. The chameleon ate it immediately. From that moment on, Noah would grind wheat bran and wait for worms to appear in it to feed the chameleon. Notice the level of individual attention each animal required. It wasn't tossing food into one giant feeder. It was studying species by species, learning their feeding habits on the fly, improvising solutions when you didn't know what to give them. The Midrash Tanchuma adds something that puts everything in even starker perspective. One day, Noah was late bringing food to the lion. The lion's reaction was immediate. It attacked him, it bit him, and Noah was left limping for the rest of his life. This isn't a pretty fable. It's a real consequence of working 24 hours a day for months with wild animals in a closed, dark, damp space. One timing mistake, and the lion destroys you. And Noah's work didn't end with feeding. There was cleaning to do. 3 floors of ark, hundreds of animals, tons of daily waste. The bottom floor kept filling with accumulated excrement day after day. The Talmud in Sanhedrin 108b says there was a kind of trapdoor through which they pushed the waste downward, but the stench permeated the entire structure. Noah had no clean water to bathe. He had no ventilation systems. The only opening in the ark was that 1 cubit window at the top, approximately 44 centimeters wide. That doesn't ventilate a ship 130 meters long full of animals. And think about the 8 people: Noah, his wife, Shem, Ham, Japheth, and their 3 sons' wives. 8 people sharing the burden of caring for that colossal number of animals for a year. That averages out to 2 people per 6-hour shift, covering the needs of hundreds of different species. The psychological pressure must have been crushing. The Midrash Tanchuma Noach section says Noah was spitting blood from the exertion. Not metaphorically, literally. His body was collapsing under the workload. But if you think the 40 days of rain were the worst part, you can't even imagine what comes next, because what came after was worse. On day 41, the rain stopped, but the ark didn't stop. Genesis 7 verse 24, and the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days, 150 days, 5 full months. The water covered absolutely everything. There wasn't a single mountain visible on the entire planet. Genesis 7 verse 20, the waters prevailed 15 cubits upward, and the mountains were covered. The water was approximately 6.5 meters above the highest mountain. And inside the ark, silence. After 40 days of deafening rain, suddenly, nothing. Just the sound of water moving beneath them, just the sounds of the animals, just the dim darkness of that luminous stone, just the smell of hundreds of animals, of waste accumulating on the lower floor, of wood saturated with moisture, of 8 human bodies that hadn't seen soap or clean water in weeks. Do you know how much isolation weighs? There's a moment in the Midrash Tanchuma where a prayer from Noah inside the ark is recorded. It says, "Deliver me from this prison, for my soul is weary of the smell of lions, bears, and leopards." Noah called it a prison, not a refuge, not salvation. Prison, because that's what it was. A floating prison with no known release date, and there was no way to know how much time was left. Noah didn't have a calendar with the exit date marked in red. He didn't have a GPS showing him his location. He didn't have sonar to measure the depth of the water. He had no radio, no communication with anyone outside those wooden walls. He only knew one thing: that God had put him in there, and that God, when the time came, would take him out. That was all. His entire information about the outside world was limited to what he could hear through the wood and what he could see through a window 44 centimeters wide. Think about what this would do to the human mind. In modern psychology, prolonged sensory isolation produces anxiety, depression, temporal disorientation, hallucinations. Noah didn't have a name for those things. He only had the darkness, the sounds of the animals, the rocking of the water, and faith. The naked faith of a man who had obeyed an impossible instruction and was now paying the price of that obedience with his sanity, with his body, with his sleep. And the wait had no visible end. Days melted into each other. Without sun, without moon, without stars, there was no natural way to distinguish day from night except by the animals' feeding patterns. The diurnal animals were hungry. It was day. The nocturnal ones became active. It was night. The animals were Noah's clock, his only temporal marker in a world without time. And this connects with something that happens at exactly day 150 that changes the entire tone of the narrative. Genesis 8 verse 1, possibly the most emotionally charged verse of the entire flood story. Then God remembered Noah. Those 4 words. Then God remembered Noah. In Hebrew, Vaiskor Elohim et Noach. The verb zachar, entry 2142 in Strong's Concordance, doesn't mean that God had forgotten Noah and suddenly remembered like someone finding an old paper in a drawer. In biblical Hebrew, zaka implies a deliberate action. The Theological Dictionary of the Old Testament by Botterweck and Ringren defines it as directing active attention towards someone with the intention of acting. It's the same verb used when God remembers his covenant with Abraham in Exodus 2 verse 24. It's not passive memory. It's an active decision to intervene. And the intervention was immediate. Genesis 8 verses 1 through 3. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were also stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained, and the waters receded continually from the earth. A wind. The Hebrew word is ruach, entry 7307 in Strong's. It's the exact same word that appears in Genesis 1, verse 2. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. You can verify it yourself. Same term, same God, same waters. In creation, the Ruach of God moved over the waters to give life. Now the Ruach of God moves over the waters to withdraw them. It's a second creation, a cosmic reset. And what comes next connects Noah's Ark with the resurrection of Jesus. I'm going to prove it to you with the numbers from the text itself. Day 150, something extraordinary happened. Genesis 8, verse 4. Then the ark rested in the 7th month, the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat. The ark stopped moving. After 5 months of floating without direction, without a rudder, without any human control over its destiny, suddenly the ark touches bottom. It stops. It settles on something solid, on the mountains of Ararat, in what is today the eastern border of Turkey. But there's a date hidden here that conceals something fascinating and connects with an event that would occur thousands of years later. The ark rested on the 17th day of the 7th month. If we count the months from Tishri, as the Hebrew civil calendar does, the 7th month falls in Nisan, and the 17th day of Nisan, according to the chronology of Passover, is exactly the day Jesus rose from the dead. Jesus died on the 14th of Nisan, was in the tomb 3 days, and rose on the 17th. The ark touched solid ground, the first sign of new life after total destruction, on the same calendar day that the resurrection would bring new life after death. Theologians like Chuck Missler and Henry Morris have developed this connection, while others debate the exact calendar system Moses used when writing Genesis. But the numerical coincidence is there for anyone who wants to see it. But Noah didn't know any of this. All he knew was that the ark had stopped moving, and that, after 5 months of constant rocking, must have felt like a miracle in itself. The perpetual swaying that had accompanied every second of his existence for 150 days suddenly ceased. The silence of still water replaced the constant sound of waves crashing against the wood. The animals must have sensed it too, because animals feel changes in movement before humans do. However, he couldn't leave. The ark was on the mountains of Ararat, but water still covered all the surrounding terrain. He was stranded on a wooden island atop a submerged peak. And Mount Ararat is no ordinary mountain. It's the tallest mountain in modern-day Turkey, with an elevation of over 5,000 meters. If the ark settled there, it means the water level at its peak exceeded 5,000 meters above current sea level. Water-covered mountains. Entire mountains disappeared underwater, and the ark floated over all of it without sinking, without breaking apart, without capsizing, without a rudder, without an engine, without a human captain in command of navigation. There's something worth pointing out here. The wood the ark was built from is identified in Hebrew as etes gopher. Genesis 6, verse 14. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. If you look up this word in any biblical concordance, you'll find something surprising. It appears only once in the entire Bible. Linguists call it a hapax legomenon, a word that exists in just one verse of the entire biblical text. Nobody knows for certain what wood it was. Theories range from cypress to teak to pine or cedar. The only thing we know is it was a wood god specifically selected to withstand a full year submerged in water, an unknown wood for a ship that had no precedent and would have no replica, and Noah sealed it with pitch. Genesis 6, verse 14. You shall pitch it inside and outside with pitch. The Hebrew word used here for pitch is kopher, and this is fascinating. If you open the Theological Dictionary of the Old Testament or Strong's Concordance, you'll discover that kopher shares a root with the word kafar, which means to cover or to atone, the same root as Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The ark was literally covered with atonement, sealed inside and out with a substance whose Hebrew name evokes forgiveness and divine covering. This is not a linguistic accident. It's the kind of detail that only appears when you look at the text in its original language. If you just connected those two concepts for the first time, hit like on this video, because what comes next deserves it even more. And what happened next is an exercise in patience that defies all human logic. Genesis 8, verse 5. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. 74 days after the ark settled on Ararat, the tips of the highest mountains began to appear. Imagine that. From the ark's window, after months of seeing only water in every direction, suddenly a dark triangle appears on the horizon. And then another, and then another. The mountains were emerging like bones of a world coming back into existence, but Noah didn't rush. Genesis 8, verse 6. So it came to pass, at the end of 40 days, that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. He waited 40 more days after seeing the mountains, 40 additional days of patience before making any move. And then he sent out the first scout, the raven. Genesis 8, verse 7, then he sent out a raven, which kept going to and fro until the waters had dried up from the earth. The Talmud in Sanhedrin 108b says the raven didn't want to go. It refused. It accused Noah of wanting to destroy its species, arguing that if something happened to it during the flight, ravens would go extinct. Since there was only one pair on board, Noah's response was blunt. The world doesn't need you because you're no good for food or for sacrifice. Harsh, but Noah had gone 11 months without sleeping and had just been bitten by a lion. His patience had a limit. The raven went out but brought no useful information. It just went back and forth, without straying too far. So Noah changed strategy. And what he did next became one of the most powerful symbols in all of human history. Genesis 8, verses 8 through 12. The episode of the dove. And this is one of the most cinematic passages in the entire Bible, and almost no one reads it with the slowness it deserves. First sending. Noah released the dove. Verse 9. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot, and she returned into the ark to him. Then he put out his hand and took her and drew her into the ark to himself. Look at that detail. He put out his hand and took her. The dove returns exhausted, having found nowhere to land, and Noah stretches his arm out the window and personally gathers her. After a year of caring for animals without rest, this man still has the tenderness to pick up a dove with his own hand. Second sending, 7 days later, verses 10 and 11. And he waited yet another 7 days, and again he sent the dove out from the ark. Then the dove came to him in the evening, and behold, a freshly plucked olive leaf was in her mouth. The most hopeful moment in 300 days. A leaf, a simple green leaf. It meant that somewhere beneath the water that still covered most of the world, an olive tree had survived and was sprouting. Life was returning. And why an olive tree? The olive tree is one of the most resilient trees in the world. It can survive floods. It can regenerate from its roots, even when the trunk has been destroyed. That the first sign of life was an olive leaf is no literary accident. It's a botanical declaration about the resilience of creation. And what Noah did after that moment of hope will surprise you. Because he did not do what you would have done. Third sending, 7 more days. Verse 12. So he waited yet another 7 days and sent out the dove, which did not return again to him anymore. The dove didn't come back. It found a place to live. The world was becoming habitable again. But notice, Noah still doesn't leave the ark. He knows the dove found land. He knows there's vegetation. He knows the water is going down. But he doesn't leave. Why? Because he hadn't received the order. The same God who told him enter the ark had to be the one to tell him leave the ark. Noah didn't make decisions on his own in this matter. He had entered by obedience, and he would leave by obedience. Period. And this reveals something profound about the difference between information and authorization. Noah had all the information he needed to leave. The dove didn't return. The land was dry. The indicators were clear. Any person with common sense would have opened the door and run out. But Noah didn't operate on common sense. He operated on obedience. And obedience doesn't ask, "May I?" when the answer seems obvious. Obedience waits until the voice that gave the original command gives the next one. There are people today who make the right decisions at the wrong time because they confuse having information with having permission. Noah had the data, he lacked the word, and he waited. 57 more days he waited after the evidence was already clear. Almost 2 additional months of patience inside an ark that no longer needed to be closed. Can you imagine the conversation between Noah and his family? The land is dry, they can see it through the window, they can smell it. Fresh air enters through the roof opening Noah had already removed. And yet, nobody moves, because the patriarch said, "We wait." And they waited. Day 314, Genesis 8, verse 13. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, that the waters were dried up from the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and indeed the surface of the ground was dry. Noah removed the covering of the ark. After more than 10 months of near total darkness, of living under the dim light of a stone, Noah removed the roof of the ark and saw full daylight for the first time. He saw the land, dry, empty, devastated, but dry, and still he didn't leave. 57 more days passed before God finally spoke. Day 370, Genesis 8, verses 15 through 17. Then God spoke to Noah, saying, "Go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and cattle and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, so that they may abound on the earth, and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Go out of the ark." After 370 days, those 4 words, "Go out of the ark." And Noah went out. Genesis 8, verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. The first thing he did upon touching solid ground was not looking for food. It was not building a shelter. It was not exploring the terrain. It was building an altar and worshipping. After a year of hell, of not sleeping, of being attacked by a lion, of hauling tons of excrement, of living in darkness, of feeding animals 24 hours a day, of surviving the destruction of all known civilization, the first thing Noah did was kneel and give thanks. And God's reaction is one of the most moving phrases in the entire Old Testament. Genesis 8, verse 21. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma, and the Lord said in his heart, "I will never again curse the ground for man's sake." And the Hebrew word for soothing aroma is reach nikoach. And if you search for this expression throughout the entire Bible, this is the first time it appears. You can verify it. Before this verse, God had never reacted to the smell of a sacrifice. Soothing aroma. God smelled the sacrifice of a broken man, limping, exhausted, traumatized, and found it pleasing. It wasn't the perfection of the sacrifice God was evaluating, it was the heart of the one offering it. And after that aroma, God said something that reveals the depth of what the flood meant even for him. And this is the most striking part of everything I've told you so far. He said in his heart, "For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth." Notice, before the flood, in Genesis 6, verse 5, God observed that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And that was the reason for the flood. Now, after destroying the entire world and starting over with Noah, God says exactly the same thing. The imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Humanity didn't change. The flood didn't fix the human heart, and God knew it. And yet he decided not to destroy again. That's the point almost no one sees. God didn't stop judging because humanity improved. He stopped destroying massively because he decided from his heart to change his method. Genesis 8 verse 22 seals this new covenant with a cosmic promise. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. The seasons, the cycles, the regularity of nature, all of that was formally established after the flood. Before the flood, according to many scholars of the text, the climate was uniform across the entire earth. There were no marked seasons. There was no visible rain from the sky. Genesis 2, verse 5 says the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the earth, and a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. The pre-flood world was climatologically different from ours. And when Noah came out of the ark, he emerged into a world with seasons, with rain, with cold and heat, a new world in every sense. And that's why he had 14 of every clean animal instead of just 2, because he needed the extras for sacrifice. God knew before the flood that Noah would need animals to offer on the altar when he came out. The number 14 wasn't for redundancy. It was advance provision for future worship. But there's a detail in the text that almost everyone ignores, and that reveals something disturbing about how Noah felt upon coming out. Midrash Bereshit Rabbah, chapter 36, records that when Noah saw the total destruction of the world, he began to weep. He said to God, "Lord of the world, you are merciful. Why did you not have compassion on your children?" And God's response was devastating. "Foolish shepherd, now you implore my mercy. If you had done so when I announced the flood to you, it would not have happened. You knew you would be saved, and so you didn't care about the others. Now you weep." That changes everything you thought you knew about Noah. He wasn't the perfect hero. He was a righteous man, yes. Genesis 6, verse 9 says it explicitly. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. But his righteousness had a limitation that God himself pointed out at the end. He didn't intercede for others. Abraham, generations later, would negotiate with God face to face to try to save Sodom. Moses would plead for Israel after the golden calf. But Noah built the ark, entered with his family, and closed the door. And the Talmud explains that for this reason, after the lion bite, Noah was left limping and couldn't properly officiate the sacrifices upon leaving the ark. It was his son Shem who acted as priest at that first post-flood altar. The man who had survived 370 days in command of the most massive rescue operation in history couldn't even stand upright before the altar. If this revelation left you thinking, subscribe to the channel, because every video we upload has this level of depth, and what comes next is going to completely change your reading of Genesis. Now, there's something you need to see in the complete chronology that gives meaning to everything, because these 370 days are not an arbitrary number. They are exactly 53 weeks minus 1 day. Researcher Stephen Boyd, in his study published in the Answers Research Journal, notes that if the flood started on a Sunday, based on the 7-day pattern of creation, then Noah left the ark on a Saturday, a Shabbat, a day of rest. The man whose name in Hebrew, Noach, means rest, according to Strong's Concordance entry 5146, finished his most brutal year of work exactly on the day of rest. And there's more. The first 7 days before the flood, when Noah was loading the animals, correspond to the week of creation. The 40 days of rain correspond to the 40 days Moses would spend on Sinai. The 150 days of prevailing waters correspond to a complete cycle of 5 months of 30 days each, the same 360-day calendar used by ancient Middle Eastern civilizations. Every number in this narrative has an echo somewhere else in Scripture. Nothing is accidental. If I told you someone spent an entire year inside a closed, dark, noisy space, feeding hostile creatures around the clock, without sleeping, without natural light, without contact with the outside world, with the certainty that everything they knew had been destroyed, you'd probably think I was describing some kind of extreme psychological torture. And in a sense, it was. But it was the torture that saved all of humanity. The Talmud in Sanhedrin 108b says that inside the ark, the animals did not reproduce. The exact number that entered was the exact number that came out. This has an obvious practical meaning. If the animals had reproduced during a year, the ark would have quickly become overpopulated. But it also has a symbolic meaning. The ark was not a place of new creation. It was a place of preservation, of cosmic hibernation. New life would begin outside, not inside. And when that new life began, God did something he had never done before. Genesis 9, verses 11 through 13. Thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth." The rainbow. The first time it appears in the Bible. A visible sign in the sky that what Noah had just lived through for 370 days would never be repeated. But the Hebrew word for rainbow is kesheth, entry 7198 in Strong's. And here's the striking part. Kesheth is the exact same word used for a warbow throughout the Old Testament. In the ancient world, a warrior who hung his bow on the wall was declaring the war was over. God was hanging his war bow in the clouds. The war against corrupt humanity was over. Massive destruction as a method of global judgment was being permanently removed from the divine arsenal. But there's something else in the covenant most people don't notice. Genesis 9 verse 15, "I will remember my covenant." There it is again, the verb zakar, to remember. The same verb from Genesis 8 verse 1, when God remembered Noah inside the ark. Only this time God is saying that every time he sees the rainbow, he himself will remember his covenant. It's not that God needs a reminder, it's that the rainbow works in both directions. For humanity, it's a visible promise of safety, and for God, it's an active and constant choice of mercy. And Genesis 9, verses 1 through 7, establish a new world order. God gives Noah and his sons the same instructions he gave Adam in the garden. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth. But with a fundamental difference. To Adam, he gave peaceful dominion over the animals. To Noah, he says, "The fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth." After the flood, the relationship between humans and animals changed. It was no longer dominion without fear. Now it was dominion with dread. And God added something he had never given Adam, permission to eat meat. Genesis 9 verse 3. "Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs." Before the flood, humanity was vegetarian. After the flood, God authorized the consumption of meat. The world Noah came out to was fundamentally different from the world he had entered. Noah survived 370 days inside a floating wooden box with no rudder, no engine, and no navigation system. He survived feeding animals that attacked him, without sleeping, without light, without any certainty of when the nightmare would end. He came out limping, exhausted, weeping at the sight of the destroyed world. And the first thing he did was worship. And when you think you know this story because you heard it as a child in Sunday school, the reality is that the version you knew was the 40-day version, the comfortable version, the version of the pretty ark with the giraffe poking its head out the window. But the real version lasts 370 days. And within those 370 days is a broken man who obeyed without understanding, who worked without resting, who preserved life while death surrounded him on every side, and who in the end discovered that his obedience had saved him the world, but cost him everything he had. If this story stirred something inside you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. There's something I left deliberately unresolved in everything I told you. Genesis 9 verse 20 says that after all of this, Noah planted a vineyard. The man who didn't sleep for a year, who was attacked by a lion, who watched the entire world die, who carried on his shoulders the survival of every living species, planted a vineyard, got drunk, and lay uncovered in his tent. But that story needs its own video. What you're about to see on screen is exactly where this continues. Click it.